Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to start out by thanking you and Senator Grassley for your leadership. Senator Grassley, when you mentioned going home the first day and your wife saying the thing she liked best at the hearing was Judge Jackson's opening statement, thank you for setting that tone and for sharing that story. And you, Senator Durbin, having to chair this, I was remembering Justice Roberts' line that he was, as a judge, he would be calling balls and strikes. And I was thinking you had to do a lot more than that. You have to call wild pitches and foul balls. And as spring training starts, this is all on my mind. You have to take a lot of curveballs. But what you did for all of us, for both teams, was to remind us why we are here. Democracy brought us here. And this isn't just our ballpark or our playing field. This is America's ballpark. This is America's court. And thank you so much for that. On the first day of Judge Jackson's hearing, I talked about how the fact that she was here to open things up. We were literally open things up. This is the first hearing where we've had guests because of the pandemic. And as we emerge from that, we see a nominee, a judge, who will walk into that court with her head held high because she is opening up that court to make every little girl and boy in America to realize that anything and everything is possible. And as Senator Booker so beautifully reminded us last week, this is a moment of joy. She is truly an inspiration to young black girls like DC resident Maddie Morgan. I was on a walk and her dad, I didn't know him, jumped out of a car because he saw me walking to bring a letter to me that she had written the President of the United States, 11 years old, and she asked President Biden that she be considered when he was looking for justices. She pointed out that with her age, she could remain on the court for at least 80 years. Her argument was that she wanted to be the voice for children. And she said, I live a few blocks away from the Supreme Court, so it will be easy for me to get there. After the president made his nomination of Judge Jackson, she said, if I'm going to be snubbed, it couldn't be for a better candidate. And she actually was here at the hearing to witness history being made. Throughout the hearing, Judge Jackson demonstrated her command of the law and her reverence for the Constitution. Judge Jackson, in fact, as we know, has more judicial experience than 4 of the nominees and now justices had when they came before this committee. 4 people who are currently serving on the court. She'll be the first person on the court to be in the room where it happens, where those decisions are made, with public defender experience. She knows the importance of public service from her parents, both teachers, and she has that perspective of knowing that life isn't always easy. She's had family members who served in law enforcement. And I think this might be a good moment to get at some of the arguments my colleagues have and will be making. And I think I might be a good person to bring this up because I'm someone that has consistently asked questions of nominees. I always ask about antitrust, even though they don't want me to ask it. I always ask about the First Amendment and many detailed questions about stare decisis and the like. And I was the one on this committee that one of the nominees actually apologized to, not for what I did, but what he said. And I want to get at some of the criticisms that we have heard lodged against this great woman. When we hear about this child pornography, what I see a mom who opened up her heart to all of us and explained to all of us how no one can be the perfect mom, no matter how hard you try. I see a woman of deep faith who was questioned about that and explained her deep faith many, many times. Let's look at the facts. In 8 of the 11 child pornography cases that Judge Jackson handled, she gave a sentence at or above either the probation office recommendations. And when she imposed other sentences, it was because she looked at the case carefully. And by the way, she made her own decision. Maybe not everyone in this room would have agreed with it, but she was being a judge. Just like judges that were supported by my colleagues made that decision. I'm not even going to mention these judges' names that I'm about to talk about, because I don't think they should be dragged into this just because they happen to make decisions that were below guidelines. One of them on the Second Circuit, strongly supported by one of our colleagues and commended, said when he sentenced a defendant to 60 months, he sentenced a defendant to 60 months, which was 60% lower than the bottom of the guideline range at 151 months. Another one who was complimented on the 11th Circuit by our Republican colleagues, he sentenced a defendant to 84 months, which was 44% lower than the bottom of the guidelines. Here's some Trump nominees. One in the Eastern District of Missouri, who's a judge, sentenced a defendant to 60 months when the guideline range was 135 to 168. Another Trump nominee that was supported by our colleagues, Eastern District of Missouri, sentenced a defendant to 60 months when the guideline range was 78 to 97 months. Another, I will not go on, but they could all have been dragged through the mud too. They could have been dragged through the mud and called names with these kinds of implications. Last week, the committee received a letter from a former federal child exploitation prosecutor in the District of Columbia who wrote that Judge Jackson, quote, had a reputation for carefully considering the circumstances of every case, and that former and current prosecutors note that she was thoughtful and individualized in her approach to these cases. And if you really want to go deep into the details here, Senator Cruz released a chart saying the average sentence imposed by Judge Jackson in possession cases, possession of porn, is 29.3 months. But it is based on only 4 cases and omits one that would raise her average to 52 months, much closer to the reported national average of 60 months. And if you were considering all of her non-production cases, possession, receipt, distribution of pornography, and yes, as a former prosecutor, I know these differences, the average sentence imposed was 65 months. I literally cannot even believe that I'm going into these details, but I am. Last, when we hear about judicial philosophy, let me quote Judge Roberts in his own hearing. He said, well, I have said I do not have an overarching judicial philosophy. I think we heard this great judge and how she's going to decide cases. She's going to decide cases with fairness, and she's going to do the best thing, and she's going to look at the facts, and she's going to look at the law, and she's going to make a decision. She recognizes, as she told me at her hearing, that public confidence in the court is crucial. That's why she's always written such long and transparent decisions to explain to the public her reasoning. She told me about her deep commitment to judicial independence. When I asked her about stare decisis, she said that if there were massive shifts every time a new justice came on or every time new circumstances arose, there would be a concern that public confidence would be eroded. As she put it, stare decisis, looking at the past cases, I'm just paraphrasing that, furthers the rule of law in this country. She is someone that understands and has shown her ability to take on complex matters. But just as importantly, she's someone who understands the real-world impact of courts' decisions. She understands that those words on the page aren't just words. Those words on the page can change people's lives, whether they can get health care, what their options are, if they can have clean water and air, even if they're going to be able to vote, when they're going to be able to vote, and how they're going to be able to vote. At this critical moment in our history, Judge Jackson has the qualities to make sure that the court and the Constitution, in Justice Breyer's words, work for the people of today. She will bring to the court her rich experience as a judge, a working mom, a family member who has law enforcement, a child of teachers, a former public defender, and a deeply committed public servant. Her story is a quintessentially American one. And as she put it, her success is, quote, a testament to the hope and promise of this country. Now, it is our duty as senators on this committee to take on that hope and promise of America. And remember, as this day moves forward, and as we hear from our colleagues, and we take this vote, that this is all about that spirit of hope and promise. And let's make Maddie Morgan proud. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.